Hello everyone, herzlich willkommen zum Filmfest München. A very warm welcome to Filmfest München. My name is Julia Weigel and it is my true pleasure to have all of these guests here tonight for a very special panel on Cinetopias. We called it Cinetopias, on cinematic spaces and what cinemas and, well, let's say spaces where we show films, what they can be today, what they should be, or what concepts there are out there. And we're really, really proud that we have a very diverse group here from Italy. Cinema Troisi here. Hello, the two of you. Very, very happy to have the two of you here, Valerio and Sara. Thank you so much for making it all the way from Rome to join us here in Munich for this discussion. Thank you, grazie mille.
Grazie a voi per l'invito.
And then we have Natalie here from Mubi. We will be talking about Mubi Go, an initiative that Mubi introduced a couple of years ago in the UK, and now we have it in Munich as well since a couple of weeks, so we will be hearing from her what that is and why this is important and why Mubi introduced it. And then we have Andrea Lissoni, the artistic director of Haus der Kunst, and he has been running quite a few cinema projects for Tate Modern. So I'm happy to have you, Andrea, here as a Munich representative. And then we're very happy to have Malve and Can from Berlin. They introduced a very interesting project in Berlin Wedding, and you will be talking about that. So for now, since we are actually, well, we introduced all of the projects, but I would love to give all of you the chance to sort of like talk about your initiatives and your projects yourself and introduce them to our audience here. So what your cinematic space is, why you chose to actually establish it, and what might be the difference to a regular, more traditional cinema space. Can and Malve, would you like to start with your project?
Hello. I'm Malve Lippmann. I'm with Can together. We are the founders of Cinema TRANSTOPIA. But we initially started 2014 in a really small store space with a big window, and which we rented originally as our studio. And we didn't really plan to do public events, but it happened that people asked us, "What are you doing?" And they watched into the window, and then we said, be back, take a look, come in. And we started doing a really transdisciplinary program. We did exhibitions, we did huge dinners where we invited people and tried to bring people together through dinners. We did listening sessions, but we also did a lot of film screenings. So with the time, the film screenings got more and more important in our program. And then 2018, the idea came that we kind of felt we need a space which is dark, which has better projection possibilities, which has seats. I mean, our space was like 6 to 6 meters, and sometimes it's 80 people squeezed in this little space, and you couldn't even move and go to toilet if you were taking your seat. So we needed a bigger space. So we looked all over town. We also had a workshop with architectural students from Turkey and Germany, and they worked on concepts because it was really difficult to find a space in town. We thought, okay, there is these wastelands, and we can build up a structure which is on the wasteland, and when the construction comes, it moves on to the next, so also as a statement for the cultural situation in the town. And then we finally found an interim solution in Haus der Statistik, and there we rented 350 square meters with high ceilings and built in a cinema. It was a cinema, we called it a cinema experiment because it was clear that it was temporary. And in this cinema experiment, we tried to show how the kind of cinema that we envisioned could look like. We ended the time in Cinema Transtopia in this interim solution in June 22 with the conference, Cinema of Commoning. We will talk about this later, I think, more. And now, since January 2023, we moved in a new space, which is now we can stay there for a longer time, and it's a big space with higher ceilings even, and we have a screen which is 620, and we have 80 seats, and we also have analog projection finally, 35 and 16. We also have DCP, and the time of improvisation ends here. And yeah, since January we're running a really tight program of curated series. Jen will speak more about the program. But what I have to say, our model is maybe different from a regular art house cinema because it's a funded model. It functions kind of like a theater with state fundings, and there is no funding for cinema in the moment, as everybody knows. So it's a huge struggle to get this money together. But we call it also a model project, which could show how a funded cinema could program and what it could be as a space of encounter, of discourse, a point for meeting, and in a transnational society.
So I can maybe continue from that point. So basically what we try to do is to explore cinema as a social space, more like a space of social discourse and exchange and solidarity. And we dedicate the whole space that we call like transnational narratives of the city. So we basically, whole program is based on created programs. We invite in people for, they come and take over the programs for a certain amount of time. They have their issues, topics, focuses that they bring in, and they're basically selecting films around these issues, talking to particular communities in the city. So on one side, it functions also as a platform to show films by young filmmakers of color in the city, but also on the other side, we are looking back in order to, take a look, a closer look at the archives, try to find some films which were neglected for, as part of the national film heritage or German film history and so on, and try to bring them also to the screen. So this is one side basically looking into the future, and on the other side looking back and try to put some films into the conversation. This is our programming in basic.
Thank you so much to both of you for introducing Cinema Transtopia to us. Andrea, I wanted to go over to you because you're a great sort of link to MUBI as well, because you've been collaborating with MUBI quite a bit in the recent years while you're in Munich, basically. That's sort of what you've tried to do here, to sort of explore this space between art, video art, and movies, more like regular art house movies. So maybe you can expand on that collaboration a little bit, and then also look back to what you did when you were still living in London at Tate.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitations. I can try to bridge everything, and then we go where we are. Before moving to London, I opened with a couple of friends a online film program, which was called Vidrom, that lasted 8 years, and was the idea was to make accessible to broader audiences film or video made by artists only, that will have the, let's say, curve of appearing in a festival, sometimes the Rotterdam Film Festival, sometimes in Marseille, occasionally in Berlin in the expanded forum session, and perhaps in a gallery all over the world, and then disappear. And maybe these work were quite amazing, were really carrying incredible histories and incredible potential also for film lovers to be seen. So completely self-funded, we decided to launch this program that remains available now. The idea was to function like a art house cinema. So you will have a screening up for a month, and then the film will disappear forever. So it wouldn't have been an archive, it would be just a screening. And we had also the, let's say, clear commitment to writers. We wanted to support new writing, and we wanted to encourage younger art historians or curators or critics to write about this form. So what remains online, and the one we were paying like very little because we had no funds, so like 100 euros for each writer, was like the text, the contribution, or the interview. And that was somehow the beginning of the thinking of what would have been setting the first cinema within a museum that dedicates to artist film, with a regular program, with a very specific regular program that will be announced at the beginning of the year as an exhibition program, in order for making this understanding in the audiences and across my colleagues at the Tate Modern that we are not showing film, we're showing art. No? And we're showing art with the aim of bringing, on the one hand, these artists within the realm of the museum, often younger, often more underground, often coming from other countries that were not at the center yet then. On the other hand, to somehow educate, to treat our colleagues with this kind of reproducibility-based art with traditional process of the museum, like registrar, long forms, and so on. So tracking the history of an artwork in form of film entering the museum with the secret aim that the museum will then engage a conversation with these artists, and one day the artists will have been considered for collection purposes, of exhibition purposes, and not necessarily with a film, right? So that was the Tate Film Program that ran for also 8 years, and had this kind of community building intention in London, a very cramped town in terms of artists moving images, artist film, and all these art house forms, but worked very well on this precise trend of once a month an artist film, a premiere, a film never seen before in a museum, also often in London and sometimes also in Europe when the country was still in the UK, in Europe. And I think 3 times a year we'll be focusing on a sort of, over a weekend, a sort of survey of someone we consider extremely relevant in the field. Could have been Bruce Bailey, but could also have been Simon Young. So could be an art house filmmaker or experimental filmmaker. And once a year there would have been a sort of group show, like focusing on an area that could have been the experience of the stereotype about what happened in Brazil after Tropicalia. No? There's a whole story of marginal cinema and so on that hasn't been really told, or like what happened in between India and Pakistan after the partition. Like, so, like focusing on a moment where the arts were particularly relevant, particularly the artists working with film. So that's what we did, and worked very well. It's still, you can still find online traces if you go on eFlux, how we were announcing and how for the institution it became fundamental, because the institution until very recently was a very post-imperialistic institution, like showing like major artists, like blockbuster artists, and not giving room to what is now at the center of the agenda, which is indigeneity, a form of contrast to any form of dictatorship or gender fluidity related practices and so on. So the film program was like guaranteeing this. Also, that film program wasn't funded. So speaking about funded, so I managed to fundraise it. I mean, basically, we were working with Luma Foundation for 2 years, and then when there was no fund anymore, the museum couldn't support funds. We found this Italian, actually, foundation called In Between Art and Film. It's run by the Bulgari heirs, or part of the Bulgari family, that supported entirely the film program, and the Tate will take half of the support for administrative, let's say, reason or purposes. And when I moved here, the question was, how do we keep alive this specific conversation, not with the art of film, but the artists that are more and more embracing the art and of film and proposing fantastic challenges. When we see them appearing like more and more, like be Ali Cherry, be Gabriela Brantes, be Laura Poitras, I'm just mentioning by memory artists that have been doing astonishing film that were presented in major festivals in the last few years. So how do we do this and how we can do it? And we obviously noticed that MUBI was closer and closer to what we were aiming to do. So we made a couple of experiments. So we screened last year together this premiere of Memoria by Apichatpong Verstakul, and then more recently the premiere of the film made by Martin Sims, another artist whose work has been shaking a little bit like between art and film world. And we are keen to continue this way. Not necessarily with the idea of setting a new cinema in town. There are many, and we, exactly as we do with music, we have a strand called tune. We don't want at all to compete or to jeopardize the fundamental ecosystem of the town, but like inserting a crack that enables to have a consistent relationship with the creators that we want to continue support. Because when you move in such big institution and you come from a more like, let's say, do-it-yourself environment, the main advantage you can count on is this institution are fantastic passports for the artists, for the communities, but also at any level. I mean, passport mean you can write on letterhead a support letter for someone who is stuck in Kurdistan or cannot escape Syria, and you can really help and like advocate through the power the institution have. But also you can endlessly support artists that you think need to be supported with grants and funds, and so on, just by saying this simple sentence, we're going to screen your work. And then it's the Brandenburg whatever film commission that is keen on. So this is the way we try to keep alive the flame of artists' moving images that, to be honest, is also something has been like going in a wave with a wavy, let's say, movement. No, so now there's like a moment of again resetting, and it's interesting to see how it advances. But so that's where we are.
And certainly a moment of exploring as well. And maybe it'd be interesting now, Natalie, to hear your perspective on it. Because I mean, like, why did MUBI as a streaming platform introduce something like MUBI Go? And maybe you can explain a little again what MUBI Go is, because you're working with cinemas, but then on specific premieres, you're working with places and institutions like Haus der Kunst or museums. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about why MUBI chose to do that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I guess, like, to start, there are like 3 sections of MUBI. So we have the collaborative, artistic sort of programming, the platform, which has been around a long time, that's very much focused on cinema and art and film and representation of world cinema and art house. Then we have theatrical, which we started in 2016, predominantly in the UK first, but we now release films in cinemas in the US, here in Germany, in Latin as well. So that is very much cinema going and theatrical and audience focused, and slightly different in terms of what the films are, but both are linked, you know, as you kind of were saying about the artist and cinema and the love of film, so we bring those 2 together. And then it seemed very natural to start something like MUBI Go, which is where we want to offer audiences the chance to watch films on MUBI, but also to watch watch a film that is handpicked every week. So Go is like a separate app. And we handpick a film that is new in cinemas. It isn't necessarily a MUBI title, and our subscribers can go to a participating Go cinema, and they can watch that film for free that week. So yeah, that's kind of the spectrum of what we're doing. We're doing the platform and streaming, we're doing in-cinema representation, and we're kind of feeding them together through Go as well.
Perfect, thank you. And then Cinema Troisi, Valerio and Sara, we are super happy to have you because, I mean, you're an institution in Rome. So maybe you can tell us a little bit. You've been around for quite a bit. And I mean, when I look at the Instagram, I've never been to your cinema space, but it looks amazing. Like you sort of like connect the old world of cinema with sort of like the new world of cinema. So maybe you can tell us like how came the institution and your space about, and what's the idea behind it? And yeah, tell us a little bit about Cinema Troisi.
Well, first of all, thank you. So yeah, as you were saying, Cinema Troisi, well, the cinema itself has opened almost 2 years ago, but the experience has been going on for almost 12 years. We started, 12 years ago as a group of very young people. Half of us were in high school at the time, and most of us were living in the suburbs of Rome, and we didn't have a place in the city center just to gather and hang out because our high school was in the city center of Rome. And so we started by occupying a movie theater because in Trastevere it's full of abandoned movie theater, but it was literally by chance that it was a movie theater because any other place would have been fine. At the time, none of us were cinephiles. We really learned about cinema by doing it and by projecting it. At first there were football matches being screened, and then say that the initiative gained some attention in the city from filmmakers. The very first were Bernardo Bertolucci, Ettore Scola, and so we started to have kind of a programming as well, but the core of the initiative was that this was a place available at all time, free for young people just to be there and gather. And this very, say, mission is what we also kept in our Cinema Troisi, because this was 12 years ago. For 2 years we renewed the movie theater while occupying it. After 2 years we were evicted, and 10 years ago we started to organize an open-air film festival in the square that is right in front of the Cinema America, which was the very first movie theater that we run. So this year it's actually happening right now. It started on June 2nd and will go on until mid-July, Il Cinema in Piazza, which means literally a movie theater in the squares. So it started from the very first square in Trastevere and is now taking place in 3 different areas of the city, from the city center to the suburbs. All screenings are free. There are 3 screenings happening at the same time every night, every day, with international and national guests. So in terms of what we carried from our past experience was precisely this sense of giving back to the city something that there isn't anymore, because Rome is a very tough city in terms of services to the inhabitants. And so our movie theater that we opened 2 years ago is open 24/7, and there is a study room on the first, on top of the movie theater. And the study room is the only one in Rome and in Italy that is open 24/7 for free. You don't need to register nor anything. So it's a single screen cinema. It has 300 seats, and we start very early in the morning screening films, and we finish very late in the night. During the past year, we've been doing this late night screening, for example, of like horror and thrillers. We do on Saturday and Sunday mornings a lot of retrospectives with a very competitive price, because the ticket is only €3. So we're organizing also a lot of things for kids. This year we've been doing a retrospective on all films based on Roald Dahl books, and for every title we were screening there was like a themed breakfast for the kids. So James and the Peach, and then everything for the breakfast was like peach jam and peach juice. And the idea we're working on is precisely improving the services of the city, yes, giving back, and also what we would like to do right now and what we're trying to do is to expand and create in Trastevere kind of a network of abandoned movie theaters. We call it diffused multiplex because instead of having, you know, screening room 1 and 2 and 3, we would like to renew and reopen all the historical movie theaters that have closed in the past few years. So this is a bit where we are at.
Scusate, non parlo inglese, quindi Sara tradurrà per me.
Yeah, I will be translating just an addition.
E intanto la ringrazio perché è sempre bravissima.
He thanks me.
No, l'idea che avevamo avuto tanti anni fa era quella che in qualche modo in città mancassero dei luoghi di incontro in cui stare insieme.
What we noticed some years ago is that in the city what was missing was precisely places to gather and to be together.
Venivamo tutti dall'estrema periferia, vivevamo quindi in dei quartieri in cui gli unici punti di incontro erano i campi da basket e di calcio delle parrocchie o semplicemente il muretto sotto casa che spesso portava poi i ragazzi nel tempo semplicemente a confrontarsi con gli stupefacenti, le droghe e qualcuno si spegneva in questo rapporto col muretto.
We were coming from the suburbs of the city and in most of the neighborhoods we were coming for the only thing that was available for like young people was like either a basketball field or just a bench where you could sit, and that same bench usually led people to literally turn off with drugs and get lost, and there was really no alternative.
E l'idea è quella, una volta incontrato il cinema, che il cinema sia con un festival all'aperto che come struttura all'interno della città potesse tornare ad essere un luogo di incontro dove tutti potevano stare indipendentemente dalla possibilità di pagare, e per questo è stato sempre importante che al fianco di attività a pagamento ci fossero come l'aula studio attività completamente gratuite come il festival.
And so the idea for us was really to make movie theaters places where you could feel at home, where you could feel again that sense of being home. And so what has been always very important for us was to have next to a service which would be going to the movie theater and buying a ticket for that, also having services that are for free and that people can benefit from at all time. And so in the case of our Cinema Troisi is the study room that we have that makes the cinema a place that people experience also for other reasons than just going to the movies.
E quindi che il cinema tornasse ad essere un punto di riferimento come era quel muretto sotto casa, e quindi un luogo sempre aperto, fruibile, o un festival molto lungo che dura 6 settimane durante tutta l'estate, che tu sai che tutte le sere lì puoi andare a incontrare gente anche se sei una persona sola.
And so in a way we want the movie theater to also gain back that sense of what the bench used to give to us young people, like that sense still of belonging. And this happens both with the Open Air Film Festival and with the Cinema Troisi. These are for places where even if you're by yourself, you can go there and you can know that it's a place for gathering, a place where you will actually meet people, actually engage in conversations with people and not feel alone in the city.
Thank you so much. I mean, it might seem a little weird to you that we have so many people up here, but I think it's very important because it shows the diversity that is out there in creative approaches to new sort of like concepts of cinema. So thanks so much for sharing all of your concepts and ideas. And there are two things or two sort of like aspects that I would like to explore a little more. One of them is access and accessibility, and the other one would be sort of like contextualization, because I think all of your projects sort of or ideas and concepts have those two things in common, to make cinema more accessible to certain groups or as a sort of like realm and space of exploration, and then contextualization in like having guests there, having a sort of like program that is a little more than just screening a film. So maybe we can explore those two fields a little more. Who wants to start?
Yeah, I can add to what you said, because we experienced this also even more during the pandemic and also after the pandemic, but also since the beginning we were doing this, that there is a really need for having physical spaces where people can meet, like you said, also not meet to consume forcibly, but also just to meet, to discuss, to exchange. And for us, it's always the discussion after the screening is as important as the screening itself. And also like the Hane, how we call it, it's like our gathering foyer area where you can get a drink, but you can also just sit, hang around, read a book, or meet with other people working on films, discussing again about the film. And we also have a huge garden area, what we activated since, I think, 4 weeks now, where everybody can bring plants to plant stuff and also to just sit and enjoy.
Yeah, and as you were talking about accessibility, I think one aspect is also important for us, talking about the diversity of film cultures, and not just only film cultures, but also cinema cultures, I mean cultures of cinema, how cinema space perceived in different communities as a space of encounter, you know, like in Western tradition we have, like, we are coming here in this kind of festivals and sit and we are quiet and watching a film and so on, but in India, in Turkey, in Nigeria, there are different kind of practices of going to the cinema and, you know, like experiencing this cinema space also as a social space. This is something also that we try to explore at Cinema Transtopia on one side. And I mean, not just like through the different spaces that we have at the cinema, but also different kind of events, gatherings. We try to discuss on film. We are doing workshops focusing on the hands-on qualities of the film, analog filmmaking, you know, like the haptic qualities of the film. We are cooperating with universities, using the space during the day for conferences, focusing on more on film theoretical discourse. These kind of things, I mean, it is also not just about films, but all around films, basically, how we see our practice.
Yeah, I mean, mainly from the transnational society, maybe you can add.
Yes.
But what I have to say also, when I hear you speaking, we had last year, for the first time, this international conference, Cinema of Commoning, in our space, where we invited cinemas from Dubai, from Jakarta, from Santiago de Chile, from Romania, from many countries, and we gathered all together with cinemas who kind of have a similar approach like you and we have, that they want to create a space out of the community to meet and to discuss film. So for us it was really inspirational to have all these people there who really have the same approach like us. This gave us so much strength for what we're doing, because sometimes in Germany we feel that we are a bit lonely with what we're doing. And yeah, so we will continue this in 24 and we'll have the second edition.
Very good, and you are growing very fast, so I mean, hopefully there will be more projects like you soon as well.
And I also wanted to add on this, what we often, I mean, one thing that has been very important for us throughout the years has been, of course, the work on the audiences that started 9 years ago with the free screenings, and there were a lot of controversies and like legal battles in the years about these free screenings, whether they were in competition with regular cinemas that were doing the shows of the current season. And what has been really interesting for us, because what we've been saying during all those years is that in that way, through retrospective films, you can create and habit in people through the fact of gathering on a summer evening in a square and have a conversation, have a beer and discover a film, then you can also create an habit in the fall and winter to actually pay a ticket to the movie theater. And together with this, we also try to be very present in our neighborhood in a way that all this experience has also benefited a lot from the support of the people from the neighborhood. For example, I'm even just thinking that everything that we sell in our bar come from local businesses, and at the same time we try to be a service for the city in a way of offering something that the city is not offering. So we often say that this is like a hospital, you know, because it's open 24/7. There's always someone there for you. So this idea of going beyond the cinematic experience in order to become a reference for everyone in the city, but through building strong relationships with everything around you.
Natalie, would you like to expand on that as well, as in like, what are the cinemas, because you work with art house cinemas mainly, and then on certain premiere projects with, like I said, like Haus der Kunst, for example. It's like, how do you choose the places that you want to work with, and what is important to you when you contextualize a launch of a film, for example?
Yeah, I think just on your point about community, I think that's very much what we try to do, and at the heart of like our ethos. But we just have a very, we have a very good presence online as well, and having subscribers across the globe means that we can make something feel more of an event. And I think that's quite the challenge with art house and independent cinema versus blockbusters, where they have such access to huge campaigns and budgets and stuff. So we're constantly trying to make independent and art house films feel special and eventized to connect with the community. So we can do that through the films, through the platforms, through partnerships, but we also have our podcast, which is fantastic, and we have the notebook online and printed. So we really connect with our community, and I think that's really important with making these films a success. But in terms of we work with any cinema. We work with theatrical sites, we work with non-theatrical, we work with multiplexes. It really just depends on the film and what that audience profile is and how to connect to it. And I think since the pandemic, we just try to make sure that we're giving cinemas as much support as possible. So if we can bring talent, to cinemas, if we can get promotions, the teams that we have are fantastic at doing that. So anything that makes something feel eventized and special is really what we're aiming for.
Andrea, I think when we look at, for example, one of your last projects here in Munich was that you had a film collective from Australia, from an underrepresented group as well. So I mean, like, access and giving access to underrepresented groups is certainly something that you are interested in as well, as a big cultural institution, a museum in Munich. So maybe you can elaborate on that perspective a little bit as well.
Thank you. That's a very beautiful question, because the show is still up and will be up for a while. And the answer is connected to the question of opening up accessibility, given that, let's say, we learn that cinema is rather a condition, it's a state of mind. Of course, there is a specific tradition, a specific event that happens in a room like this, but from an artist's perspective, like since the early experimental cinema, the artist cinema, it's been clear that it is possible to twist and to tweak a little bit, and to generate a condition for that experience to happen, rather than necessarily stick on that specific, double 16mm availability plus the 35 and the 5-inch, all that thing. It's fundamental, because it goes down to the materiality of the film, the fundamental materiality of the film, but can be also adapted to the time and the situation. So what we try to do is to follow as much as possible an artistic logic. So if we invite a musician who is an artist by background and makes an astonishing film like Elisa Crampton and has made a film that we supported and has to do with indigeneity in Latin America and a specific broader community, we spend time with them and we try to find out what's the best place for that to be shown, in which form, no? And then sometimes you get also to terrible feeling of you make the screening happening and then you have a looping, which you don't really want because you know you're jeopardizing. But if the artist, so to say, is open for that, then it makes sense and you can do it. So us for Carabing, we decided that, I decided that the bunker, no, at the Haus of Kunst is actually a place where you really see the story. I mean, everyone can tell you that awful things have happened everywhere, but it looks like a normal Italian building, right? I mean, we grew up in Italy. There's so many huge buildings that have the same form. So they haven't been made all by Mussolini, so it's fine. But in a bunker, you understand there's a situation, it's a shelter. So we decided to set in that specific space practices based on moving images that were challenging the history. And we started with a Tony Cook's survey show, someone who's been really advocating for African-American thinking through film in a very inventive way, and then Carabing Film Collective. When Carabing appeared, they started shaking the roots of film, no? Like in Berlin at Forum Expanded and more. And they deserve their work to be seen in a place that functions as an archive, that bunker, takes time. It takes time to go through all the film, but also pushes to challenge how stories are told. I mean, stories of art, stories of the world, the voices that need to be represented, but also stories of film, because this collective is a big family. I mean, never made a film in their life, no? But still they're using the camera as the same shock that maybe I had the first time, and I don't want to compare at all. I saw a David Lynch film, I couldn't get any clue about the way he was connecting, right? Like connecting places and times. So because of the belief that everything is connected to the soil, the language ends up being so much connected to like putting the camera next to the soil, no? And you have the camera that's always like working so next to the earth, and then they are like bizarre cuts through dreams and voice and all that is so influential on the language of film that we decided that let's make a survey of that. Then comes the further accessibility, which is the main preoccupation of trying to see the institution, and now being a little bit like not humbly, let's say, trying to share what we're doing as a program making center, not so much an exhibition center where there is film and music, but a programming center in which everything holds. So they are there in the moment you have a survey show of Katerina Ladik, who was a fundamental figure as an actress in the, let's say, former East Bloc world that works with voice. So we have a major preoccupation with voice, and voice, she's a singer, composer, and composer. Whilst there is a huge exhibition on photography that come mostly from Africa, has to do with voices, but has to do with all those voices that have strong identity that haven't been listened enough. So by connecting without necessarily saying how you connect, I assumed, and through bodily perception also, and not too much to reading, the public gets this form of grasping, encountering, and also blending with respect all different forms, all different preoccupations that artists or different community express. So that's how we do it. I mean, we're obsessed with the program as if we're like programming a cinema in a way that everything somehow connects or echoes and reflects. And this is a major, let's say, content-driven task that we have. And that's how to answer also, how do you make context? You make context by not in a postmodern way, but in a way in which you hope that some red threads are perceived at least, no? Not necessarily seen, but perceived.
I think sometimes also cinema can be, in this sense, what Edgar Reitz said, lately I found this idea quite interesting, that the cinema is something what we perceived always as a public space, but now it's kind of inverse, that it's maybe one of the only spaces where you have this piece, where you turn off your phone, where you listen into a story for 1.5, 2 hours, and you don't get this disturbance of being public, of being online, of reacting, what you still do in your private sleeping room now, that you post your private sleeping room, but in the cinema maybe it's a space where you have this piece somehow to watch for 1.5 hours someone else's perspective. So this is maybe something which is very precious, and I think it's also something what is very special about the cinema space, like the physical cinema space, and which is maybe also different from watching a movie on your laptop or so, or on your home screen.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that, I guess. Someone else wants to comment on that as well? Nope. Ok. Yeah.
Nel nostro caso il ragionamento, naturalmente senza nulla togliere le piattaforme, però il cinema era entrato nelle case con la televisione, poi è entrato nelle case con le piattaforme, e quindi in qualche modo si è scordati che la sala cinematografica non è semplicemente un videoregistratore dove mettere il film.
So in our case, coming to how we experience film and also to the relationship with the platforms and with the home screening in general, let's say that television had entered, our homes first with the television and then with the laptop and platforms, and in a way we forgot that the physical spaces of cinema are not just a recorder where to press play and play a movie, but can be further more than that.
Ma deve tornare ad essere una casa.
And it has to go back to be a home. So if the cinema got to the homes with television and computers and platforms, then now it has to go back to feel like a home.
In quanto case, però, collettive, sono spazi pubblici, e quindi poi le nostre città devono essere in grado, anche paesi in generale, di tutelare questi spazi a livello urbanistico, salvaguardandoli dalle riconversioni, perché altrimenti cambia il valore dell'immobile. Quindi il primo passaggio è un passaggio urbanistico di tutela di questi spazi come spazi culturali e pubblici.
But as these are also public spaces and kind of collective homes, or like community homes, as we could say, the very first step is for cities to take care of preserving and protecting these places from usually reconversion, so from being turned into something else. So the very first step in order to be able to, for cinemas to feel like home, is to have a city that takes care of protecting those places.
I really like the concept sort of like of calling a cinema or any sort of like cinematic space a home. And I think that's a beautiful sort of like note to leave this conversation on. Because I mean, we've just touched upon the surface of things that are possible. And we could go on forever to explore that a little more, but the idea behind this panel was that there are a lot of ideas and new concepts out there to sort of like reshape the idea of what cinema can be or could be. And I'm really hoping that all of your concepts are going to be super successful in the next coming years. And I'm really hoping that we can continue this conversation to make aware of those new ideas. And I think Andrea has something to say.
No. I just was playing with it. Sorry, I didn't want necessarily to say something. But I can say that it's actually a very good point. And what I understand from the point is that there has been a transformation. No, we cannot negate that there is huge lower audiences going to cinema, and this is also affecting in some forms other arts like theater and of course museum as well. No? So there's like in the last 3 years, it's minus 30% everywhere in the museum in the world. Like in some cases, minus 50, okay. This is a point. What I think is interesting is not so much the data, but is that there are incredibly relevant artists that work with moving images and happen to be filmmakers as well, that understand that the degree of attention that is required in a gallery space is definitely not the degree of attention you can deal with in a cinema, in a movie theater. And therefore they are transforming the language. And I think that's absolutely relevant and needs to be considered. And when they want to confront themselves with the space, with the galleries, they elaborate their language not in a direction to be more slick or more catchy or more impactful, but to twist, to push the boundaries of the language. And I guess there's a reason why Apichatpong Versacool next week is presenting a VR work in Frankfurt, and there's a reason why his work is so fundamentally different, but also resonates so much in space and makes this strong force of attraction. There is a reason why Saudat Ismailova can present a film maybe every 7-8 years in a big festival, but then when she sets her work in space, that work generates a different understanding of the space, and her language is changing and will be changing, no? Within the galleries and outside the galleries. And that is also the case of Amar Kanwar, that makes more and more films that are now kind of working on microloops, no? And these microloops are in the end conceived for you to enter space and never having the feeling, oh my God, it started 90 minutes ago, no? And so I guess the outcome is that there are, of that note, that yes, there's a challenge for everyone who is in the various industry to generate forms of intensity and attraction, but it is also an urgency of championing those younger or not necessarily younger artists or filmmakers that is really changing the language to generate that form of intensity or affection that it's needed, because otherwise it's going to become really old-fashioned museums or old-fashioned institutions. No? That's definitely a note that makes me think, because it's true, and I mean, it's a responsibility we all have also not to, in search for diversity and form of representation, not losing the point of like, are we not getting the art slipping out from the stage, which is somehow our mission as well, now as a public, let's say, representative, but it's more a question than I mean, there's a question that can be answered, no? I guess.
Absolutely. That should most definitely be our second edition of this panel, to continue on like how can we actually bring young folks back to the cinema and back to the sort of like spaces that we are all trying to create. Thank you so much to all of you for being here, and I would say let's continue this conversation outside. Thank you so much. Thanks to the audience.